Welcome back, my friend. It is great to see you first and foremost. And so we spend a couple of weeks apart, and there's a couple of things we need to talk about and catch up on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like good to be back. Good to be back. Let's get going.
All right. So one of the things that obviously two of the topics that I had in my hip pocket we agreed on. So it's like two on my end and two on your end, and you brought all four. So we were in agreement for a bit. Sheffield Wednesday situation. And I guess this is administration for dummies, that particular section, because right now, Defon Chansiri has basically said, enough is enough, and he has now put them in administration. It is an automatic 12-point deduction. They're at the bottom of the championship. But just because you're in administration doesn't mean that everything is solved. You still have bills to pay. You still have deadlines you still have to meet. There's a 28-day window. Please, if you would, sir, break down administration for dummies and what the steps are here for Sheffield Wednesday, even though Defon Chansiri has apparently had enough of the whole thing.
Yeah, so basically, the administration is a mediator, right? But somebody that comes in and basically pays the bills. But somebody will come in and strip back all the costs. So they will pay the bills, the minimum amount of bills. So they will make cutbacks wherever they can, because the administrators are like an independent financial company. They don't want to splash the cash. They want to streamline it as much as they can. And then in the process, they're trying to find a new buyer for the club. So, Sheffield Wednesday have had some bids on the table, and the owner has refused to accept them. So now it's got to the point where obviously he can't get to paying the bills, and he would rather the club go into administration than take the offers that are on the table. Now, that doesn't mean to say that it gets sold for any less or for any more, because there'll be some T's and C's that will be outlined. But ultimately, the administrator is a body that will come in. They will make decisions now on the overall management. They will be the ones picking up the wage bill and running operational costs, and they will be the ones that will be mediating a new buyer. And then, Sheffield Wednesday's future. I mean, don't get me wrong. When somebody goes into administration, it's never 100% safe, because you still got to agree on the selling rights, right? So there is a risk that it just goes into liquidation on the back of that, and then the club will be out the league, etc., and have to basically be a Phoenix club, rebirth itself. But we don't know which way he's going to be shaping this potential sell. Now, we know that DeJohnny owns the stadium rights, and obviously we know he owns the team rights. So there's still a bit of a way to go. Now, you say 28 days. Now, yes, traditionally it's 28 days for an administrator, but they can apply for it to be extended if they want to. We've seen that in previous cases with Derby County, etc., etc. If there's interested buyers that come to the table and they're keen, then it's a negotiation. So that could take as long as it takes, really. But Sheffield Wednesday is a big brand. It's a big brand. It's got a huge consumer base. So I can't see there being short of a few interested parties. Now the problem is that it needs so much innovation. It needs so much investment. The stadium is run down. The squad is at its bare minimum, and obviously there's debt associated to it. So, you're coming in to buy that club. You're going to be having to part with probably £500 million if you factor in a new stadium, and then get the squad up to being competitive level, and then clear the debts. And obviously, the other thing I haven't concluded is the training ground. The training ground is completely run down as well. So it is a complete new project. But on the same time, it's got so many attractive parts to it that it really will be an attractive proposition for somebody. And if I was to say to you, which clubs belong in the top league because of their history, because of their metrics, fan base, etc., then Sheffield Wednesday would be in that conversation. It's got so much history, etc. So I think this could be a turning point for the better. There's no doubt about it, but there's still a few steps to go backwards first.
Topic number 2, and it was a topic that on Monday morning's show we spent a good 20 minutes on. And I know it will surprise you, tongue firmly planted in cheek, that it was about Atlanta United's best friend, John Textor, and the new news that is new reports that are associated with him, where he basically said, tell you what, and he walks into an imaginary room, has a conversation with Fosun, the owner of Wolves, and is like, tell you what, I want to buy you. We haven't talked about this at all. I'm walking in the door. I want it to be cash and shares of like 150 and 250 for like 400 million or so. And Fosun didn't take too kindly to that because they would have liked to have, maybe had a conversation first. And now they want to seek outside investment to help them out. John Textor seems to be, hell-bent on having this one, now added to the portfolio, where we have all these discussions that Matt Slater had at The Athletic about Eagle 2.0 and going public and stock exchanges and stuff. And all of this going on while apparently he now, and this is stuff that we've have cycled through in the past, Eagles' main lender, Ares Management, according to Matt Slater, has been trying to draw back $425 million US that it loaned to Textor in 2022 to buy Lyon. He's given Ares most of the proceeds from his sale of his Palace shares, forced to accept the imposition of an independent director at Eagle to oversee Ares' interests elsewhere in the group. That director stepped down, replaced by another insolvency expert. Ares and Textor are discussing whether it's best for them to divorce. Perhaps Textor keeps Botafogo, Ares gets Lyon. Textor has another disagreement with Iconic. And last week in Florida, it was decided that the judge in Florida said, not my purview. That's not my geography. It's got to be done in England. So $75 million with Iconic and Eagle, and it's now in England. Can you sort this out, or is it sort outable?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, look, media like to create a narrative which is a lot worse than what it is. So going back to the Ares one, yes, there's a significant amount of money that Ares have given Eagle Football Holdings, especially for the acquisition of Lyon, as you highlighted. But, in return for that 400 million, the breakdown of the ownership there is only roughly about 6% that they've got, if that. So in theory, out of the whole Eagle Football Holdings ownership breakdown, it's very, very hard for them to force a sell because Eagle Football Holdings is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got it in front of me 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 5, 5. Sorry, 50, 6, 7, 8. Here I'm going. 20 different organisations, right? And Ares Management has got 5 or 6 actually, 6 of those companies in there. But if you add its total stake, it's less than 5.3%. Now, the biggest stakeholders are Iconic Sports, which has got one of its lawsuits out with them. And then you've got Michel Kang, who's got another 6%. And then you've got lots of other investors. And another significant investor is Elmwood Eagle. Now, these guys have a lot of voting power. And it's John Textor and them, that they seem to be quite solid. And then the other one, which has got like 4 or 5 companies in this Eagle Holdings, is Monroe Capital. Okay, so 2 companies there that between them have about 11% of the voting rights. And if you put that with John Textor's 65%, then they've got 76 together. And going back to Ares Management, they've actually agreed to defer all payments for another year. So that's been settled. They're happy to lay back for another 12 months. So appreciate what Matt's saying, but he's just, a little bit off there in the fact that could they hold it over to Lyon? Well, 12 months down the line, they could. If John Textor doesn't refinance, then there could be all sorts of conversations. But what John Textor's trying to do is stay relevant, right? He's trying to stay relevant. He knows that Wolves are looking for investment. And yes, they've been open and sort of suggested that they're up to giving away 49%. Now, I tried to buy their women's team last year, and we was offered 49%, but we wanted 51%, and they weren't interested in that in any shape or form. So I know that they are looking for that investment. But also, I mean, if you read that same article, Matt will also say that they've been in discussions with 5 or 6 other championship clubs as well. So he needs an English club because he wants to float it, right? He wants to fly Eagle Football Holdings 2.0. Now, people are saying to me, where's he getting the money from? Well, Marinakis is definitely operating in the shadows with him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's being funded with that because obviously part of the 2.0 launch was with the Marinakis group as well. They want a South American club, i.e. Brazil, Botafogo. Botafogo wants some clubs in Europe to be able to bring the Brazilian players over, and obviously Marinakis has got the Victoria group as well. And then ideally you want a championship club to be able to feed those players into, to allow them time to grow. And then, you know, obviously it's cheaper to buy a championship club than it is to buy a £400 million stake in a Premier League club, and you're going to have a lot of change out of that. So yes, you know, these conversations are happening. I think John's trying to stay relevant in the media. He's trying to make it build up some momentum from his stakeholders to say, look, yeah, I'm still active. I'm still looking for clubs in England. Yes, we put in a bid for Wolves, but was it official, or was it just media leaking something that wasn't official? Has it peed Wolves off? Yes, because it wasn't through the official channels. But Wolves are looking for investment, right? So that's no secret there. There's more in this one, John. There's more in that one. And John Textor's not going away, right?
Okay. And, you know, I know that you in the past have mentioned Fubo TV and their the other elements of the portfolio of John Textor, which mean that people are attracted to continue to have business with a gentleman like that. So taking that as that recent example, and what we've always tried to say after the conversations with you, when you see a situation like this, look at the entire portfolio of an individual. Don't just look at the sports and entertainment element of this. Find out what else is going on with that individual and see where there might be interest and longer-term investment, and playing a long game would help out that investor that wants to come to the money in the short term that would be headed towards sports.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these guys, they know how to run business. So I'm not saying they know how to run sports organisations, but these guys know how to run business. You know, they're billionaires for a reason. You know, there's two sayings. You don't become a billionaire without one, knowing what you're doing. And then the other saying is you don't become a billionaire without doing some crooked work in the meantime. So, you know, John Textor's ticking all those boxes at the moment, right? He's showing his creativity and he's showing that he knows how to navigate some shortcomings as well. So fair play to him.
Topic number 3 is now when you had these three terms together in a sentence, I was instantly like spidey senses were going, what? You had in the same sentence MCO, infiltration, and mafia all in the same sentence. That I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing when all three of those are in the same sentence. What is going on here?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I don't think it is much of a surprise that the mafia have been connected to Italian football clubs, right? They use it as a process to laundering money, to access money, etc. But it come to our attention that what we have seen is the judicial administration in Italy. Now they've now taken control of Bear Holdings, but it's a club they've actually taken control of, which is SS Juve Stabia, which play in Serie B, but it's also part of Bear Holdings. Now, that club, Stabia, is 52% owned by Bear Holdings, and that's led Daniel J. McCory. And then you've got Andrea Lungella, who's 48%, but he was pretty much the primary owner until 25 when Bear Holdings acquired that 52%. Anyway, the judicial administration say that there's been long-term association with the Camorra Mafia, and they found conclusive evidence that they have been controlling the match day ticketing, season tickets, catering, food and beverage concessions, stadium contracts, cleaning, security, maintenance, healthcare, protection money, and travel service. So there's a few areas they haven't. There's a few areas they haven't controlled, but they're pretty much they're controlling everything. So what we're suggesting is that roughly takes up to about 50% of their annual revenue, and a lot of that is going through the Camorra Mafia. Now, Italians the judicial system are saying, look, this has been going on for a long term and you've played ignorance to it. We're not accusing anyone in the club here of any criminal activity, but you've just definitely turned a blind eye to this and you haven't done anything about it. Now, you could appreciate they probably haven't done anything about it. We're not going to leave any turn. So the judicial department have come in and they've taken control of the club now, and they're going to be running the operations side, so i.e. trying to bring in new contractors. But I don't think that's going to be as easy as it sounds, because there's no doubt the mafia will be controlling its rivals or its local areas in the meantime as well. But looking into this a little bit further, I've done a little article on this on LinkedIn, and this is the third club this year that the judicial administration team has possessed. And there's another club in Serie C, which is Crotone, obviously not pronounced the correct way, here, but they've been invested that they've been infiltrated by the Calabrian mafia for 10 years now, since 2015. And then you've got Foggia Calcio 1920, which is also another Serie C club, and they've been infiltrated by the Foggia mafia, and that's basically intimidation and extortion from around 20 businesses associated to the football club. And if we look back at this, look, Inter Milan, AC Milan have had connections with mafia. Palmero have had connections with the mafia. They're not the only ones. There's probably a whole list of clubs, etc., that go on. But the point of all of this is how much money has been taken from the football Italian ecosystem just because of organised crime. And I don't want to leave this and make this an Italian problem, because this article I put on LinkedIn, actually some people have actually responded to this and said, look, this is just not an Italian thing. This actually happens in Brazil. This actually happens in Portugal. This actually happens in Eastern European. And because organised crime is a global thing, right? So, and they use clubs, multi-club ownership models as a way of laundering money. So, last year I was asked to do a session with Interpol, right? Looking at how these organised crimes can use multi-club ownership models as a way of filtering that money, with limited detection. So there's definitely a vehicle for them, but yeah, definitely comes to me. But at the same time, I just want to pick this up. Brera Holdings are not in it. I do believe that they know something more than what they're letting on, because actually there was a couple of weeks ago, right, that they actually changed the way that their company was structured. I'll just get out the exact information here, because I want to make sure. So they took a business pivot, right? So they changed their sports MVO company from a Solana blockchain, changing its ticker from a Brea to an SLMT in September 25. And this is not a coincidence, right? They knew that this was coming, and they anticipated bigger problems in their portfolio. So yes, they took a hit on the shares, but they started to climb back up now using a different market. But ultimately, though, they're going to leave themselves open to further investigations from NASDAQ, where their listing is listed to, and potentially some of those key individuals are going to be scrutinised even further. But yeah, it's interesting. That's all I can say on that at the moment.
Yeah, yes. So looking at Brera, holding company listed, courtesy of our friends at the Wikipedias. MCO focused in sports, offices in Milan and Dublin, currently own 4 association football clubs and a volleyball club, traded on the NASDAQ, world's first publicly traded multi-club sports ownership group, which is, and that's as of March of 24. And it goes back to Dan McClory, as you mentioned with them. So the clubs that they are tied to, you mentioned Brera and you mentioned Juve Stabia in the Italian pyramid. You have Brera Strumica, which is in Macedonia. You have Brera Ilic, which is in Mongolia. And you also have WFC Tveria Brera Strumica as well. So you have 2 Macedonian clubs, one that we know in the first division, another one that still apparently, I guess, just exists in name only. And then you go to Mongolia and 2 in Italy, which is that's an interesting mix. I'll just use the word interesting there.
Yeah, they've also got a volleyball club in Italy as well there as well. So they're not they're quite a multi-sports organisation as such. And what they have done is they've bought these lower level clubs and they've changed the names, etc., to unify the branding, etc. But as I said, Stadia is maintained its, in terms of its identity, it's maintained that identity separate from the branding. But that's because obviously they don't own 100% of the club, and obviously we have seen a lot of the European clubs, so they're very protective of their image, branding, etc. So I understand that. But the point is here, those countries are not necessarily have rigid checks, right? So if they're not having those regular checks and they're not being scrutinised by wider governing bodies, then it's probably a lot easier to filter money through, carry money through, whatever ways they want to do. What I'd be interested in is looking at the movement of players within there, etc. Looking at the average gate receipt, stadium tickets, to see if they're actually genuine, because that's one way that you can fabricate money. Is make out that you sold 10,000 season tickets, but you're only averaging 2,500, and then, questions a mark of, where the other 7,500. But, there are sort of tactics that any club can sort of navigate. We've seen it in the Premier League, right? Because in the Premier League, for example, I'm not getting off track here, but, that they have contracts, so they have to have high stadium utilisation. So it's as high as like 96, 98%. Now, if clubs don't have that, they have to prove that they've sold those tickets for that day, because you can't guarantee that everyone turns up. So what a lot of the owners do is that they buy the missing seats. So people on that day, they buy the missing seats because they need to make sure match day revenue is at its highest in order for them to meet PSR rules, right? So that's a tactic that can be used and manipulated in other ways. So I wouldn't be surprised if mafia, organised crime is using that tactic to say, look, we've actually got 10,000 season ticket holders, but not everyone turns up every week. That's just life, However, we've got this money coming through the system. So there's nothing that organisations can do about that,
Topic last, and it has to do with alphabet soup and the renaming of things. And I thought it was interesting. It's like, okay, we're going to call ourselves I think they're heading to ECA now. That's the new one, right? They went from one name and they're now the ECA. Is that the right direction on that one?
Yeah, ECA was the European Club Association, which was rebranded in I think 2008. Around that time, they was the G14, a representation of elite, the wealthiest clubs in Europe. But they've just rebranded now to, I think it's like the European Football Clubs Association, because look, what the ECA were, there was a representation of the world's elite clubs, but it was like a closed shop in terms of its governance. Now, if you were rich and your club earned so much money, then you was entitled to Tier 1, and Tier 1 gave you voting rights. And then what we saw was that the lesser clubs, they was invited to subscribe, but they never had any voting rights. And then we saw another union form last year, which was like a union of European clubs. And it was for the voice for the smaller clubs, basically. And it was like they were saying one vote, one membership, etc. And that grew quickly over time. And then the ECA saw, actually, we need to restructure what we're doing here, because if we don't, we're going to probably lose our power. Now, the ECA won't lose its power because, obviously, one, it's represented by the wealthiest clubs, and we know that money talks. But what they did do is they changed their membership quite quickly, and now they've opened it up to all the clubs in the top leagues across the 55 European nations. And now there's roughly 800 members in there, and it's probably the brainchild of Khalifa, actually, the PSG stroke current ECA president. Probably done himself the world of good for the next FIFA presidency. I think he's going to be a strong candidate for that. But politically, what does this mean? Well, it still means that ECA controls the commercial operations of European football. They will have a big say in what that looks like at FIFA, on the global tournaments and any new tournaments that are up and coming. But what they are now is a bit more reflective of the European landscape rather than just the rich clubs. So there's a modern adjustment that was needed. But I'm not too sure it's going to have much of a sway in terms of the way it's reflected, because the big clubs are always going to control football, right? Under the table, they do. It's just, there's one thing that happens on the shop floor, but we're not privy to is what those conversations are behind closed doors, or messages that are exchanged under the table. And we know, like, for example, in England, Liverpool, Man United control football, and what the rest do is what they want them to do, and people will say, well, that's a bit of a harsh thing to say, but no, it is. It's just the way football has been for many years, right? And people just have to accept that. I won't say accept it, but it's just the way it is. It's just the way football is. Certain clubs control it. Real Madrid control Spanish football. If they want something to happen, they have a word with the royal family, who are their prime backers, and law changes. It's just,
Strange how that works. Absolutely. Great to see you, my friend. As always, I love it when we can educate everyone on this side of the Atlantic about what's going on the other side of the Atlantic and how it impacts both sides. As we're growing the game here, and it's established overseas, and now economics and Vulcan chess and trying to figure things out in 3 dimensions. It's always great to see you, my friend. Thanks again. We'll do this again next week, and we'll continue the discussions and getting smart when it comes to MCOs and everything going on and how it all interlinks. Great to see you, my friend. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you.